Hey everybody, welcome. We are live for another Inkarnate live stream. Happy Friday. Today we're doing part 4 in our Parchment world map series. In part 3, we created desert and wasteland biomes. In today's episode, we're going to be covering forests, both the natural ones and the fantastical ones. It means we're going to be covering what types of what types of forests there are, where to put them, what kind of stamps that you should be using, whether to texture them with a texture or to use object shadows. So a lot of things to cover today. Hey, Tangle Whistle, glad to have you here. So let's not waste any time. Let's just jump right in here. So first we should cover what kind of forests there are. And in the last episode, what I did is I organized them by temperate or by your climate zones. And so we'll start at the top with the frigid zone and move our way towards the equator. Hey, Adam, glad that you're here. So up at the very top in our frigid zone, you have what are called boreal or sometimes called taiga forests. And basically these are harsher. They're a little less diverse species-wise because of that harsh environment. Mostly coniferous because they're better suited for that environment. You do have some scattering or peppered deciduous trees kind of peppered throughout, but mostly coniferous. There are two types of these forests. There's one which is called an open canopy. That one's a little further north, while the closed canopy is a little further south. Now, the open canopy just means that there is not enough trees to create a dense canopy, while the closed canopy is one where there's enough dense trees to create some kind of canopy. So boreal or taiga forests are generally up in the frigid zone. And you can also have them bleed off into the temperate zone as well. I've noticed that you can do that. For instance, you might want to create a open boreal or open taiga up more in the frigid zone and then create a closed one below the frigid line into the temperate zone. That's kind of nice to do. So next we have our temperate zone, and there are three types of forests in the temperate zone. There's a deciduous forest. As you guessed, it's predominantly dominated by deciduous trees, while conversely a coniferous forest is going to be predominantly coniferous trees, right? And then there's also a temperate rainforest, which was where I live. I live in Oregon. That's a temperate rainforest. We get lots of rainfall. There's a lot of species diversity. You have both deciduous and coniferous trees within a temperate rainforest. So a lot of options there. And then finally, our last category is our tropical forests. And there are four kinds. There's an evergreen rainforest, which gets the most amount of rain, and it's the most diverse. So that means you can throw in a lot of different species of trees when you're making this forest, okay? And it gets the most rain. And that's why it's so diverse with all that access to water. The next one is a tropical moist forest. It's a little further from the equator, and it gets just a little less rainfall. The next is a tropical dry forest. It gets the least amount of rain, and therefore it has the least amount of diversity because it doesn't have this very characteristic seasons like the temperate forest does. It has a little bit more aridness to these drier forests. That generally means there's less diversity. So the trees there are more adapted to that kind of environment. So you're not going to have as much diversity. That last one is a mangrove. These are found along the coastlines, and they're found in brackish water. Brackish water means a mix between salt and fresh water, and these trees have adapted to live within brackish water. Okay, so those are the different types of forests. Now there are also fantasy forests as well. And when there comes to fantasy forests, there's a whole bunch of ones. You can make a forest made of blood, obsidian. You can have a petrified forest where all the trees have kind of turned into stone. You could have a salt forest. There's all these different types of fantasy forests. So we'll make a couple of them in this stream, but I want to focus mostly on the more natural ones. So we'll start with those first, and then we'll kind of move over to the fantasy ones. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop this group to 0 so we can see what we've been working on here. And then next we'll go over and we're going to talk about where to put the kind of forest that I have. Now I've already manually kind of off screen added in this. I did this in the last episode with deserts. And the way that I decided it was really, really simple. I used that climate zone guide. So what I did is I kind of just turned on the climate zone guide a little bit, that bring the opacity up just a hair and I could see it. And then I went with that line tool and then just decided, okay, I'm going to have a Boreal or a Taiga up here at the top. As you can see, it's mostly, a lot of it's in the frigid zone. If I go up, you'll see there's a Boreal Taiga. Another one right here, which I was going to do a mix between maybe closed and open canopy. And then in that temperate zone, you'll notice all the different types of temperate forests that they have, right? A temperate rainforest, a coniferous, evergreen, and another coniferous forest over here, all within that temperate zone. Into my subtropics and tropics, I've got my tropical moist forest. I've got a deciduous, or let's see here, a tropical moist forest over here, and another one right here. Though I think I might switch one of these over to a dry one. I don't think I meant to say both. I'll push this one over here, this tropical moist one, and make that a dry one. And then we're going to have one mangrove just right over here, right along this coastline, and I'll have, maybe it transforms into a different type of forest the more further inland it goes towards the mountains. And then I'll have a couple more temperate forests, like a deciduous forest here, a boreal taiga, and then I'll probably put some fantasy forests, like this dead forest over here, right next to that kind of dark, grayish wasteland there. And then I think I was also going to put another forest right here, a mushroom one. So another fantasy one. And if we have enough time, we'll make a couple more fantasy ones. But for now, we'll stick with those. So I'll go ahead and remove the climate zones as I just don't need it. So you can kind of see it. And then I'll take those forest locations and I'm just going to bring the opacity down just a little bit. So at least I can kind of see it and I can kind of work with it. It's like, okay, I can kind of see where each thing is. Okay. All right. Let's go start at the top with our boreal and our taiga. And I'll go ahead and what I think I'll do is I'll keep this brown texture right here underneath. And then I'll go ahead and just place this white snow-like, or this kind of grayish texture that I used right here. And maybe I'll use it over on the FG layer. Let me see what it looks like. Make sure it's the right color. I think it needs to be a little bit brighter. So we'll bring it up. I wanted to make sure that it's around the same brightness as that one. So we'll go to texture here, bring the brightness up right here, go up a little bit more. There we go. And I'm just going to use this color right here as the base texture underneath of it. And then I'll go ahead and use like my alpha textures, like snow. There's the snow here. If you have a hard time seeing what each thing is, like you don't know what the alpha is because it's hard to see with the background, just go over to show names and then it will show all the names, and then that way you won't have a hard time kind of seeing it. So I'll just go ahead and pick this light snow right here and I'll just go ahead and place it right on top here. I think I'll place some over here as well. We got some snow, and I think I'll put some snow over here as well on this side, just so it's within that area. There we go. Okay, I got some nice snow in my frigid zone, as you would kind of expect. There we go. And what I might want to do is I'll have maybe a closed canopy at the bottom, and then I'll have an open canopy as I'm going up. So I think that might be a good idea. So we'll go into the catalog, and I'll just type in tree. And remember what we talked about with boreal or taiga. It's mostly going to be coniferous instead of deciduous. So we'll start with deciduous tree or coniferous trees first. For instance, this pine tree right here, this shaded pine, both of these work just fine. We'll go ahead and place them here. And this is where I also want to set some scale. Now, when there is a scale inconsistency problem that you're going to run into with a lot of maps, for instance, at a certain scale, you probably wouldn't even be able to see individual trees. So you'll have to do some discrepancies with scale, like either bring them up a little bit, or we'll have to cover a couple methods on how to make a dense forest without using so many individual trees. We'll go over different techniques, but the first and the most obvious technique that most people use is just placing a bunch of trees down at once. So because I'm starting with a open or closed canopy at the bottom, I'll just individually just place a bunch down here like this. They're all a little too big, more than likely. So I might want to go down, select them all, and just bring the size down about that size. Of course, these are massive trees if you put them up against the mountains, but you want to be able to see the tree without it being completely blurry. And if it is blurry when you get it small, the exports go up to like 16K. So you shouldn't have any problems trying to find it. Okay, let's go ahead and create the more denser areas now that I bring the size down. Like this, I'll have this closed canopy down here. And then as I'm going further up into the open part of the canopy, I'll create some large clusters. Like this, some large clusters. And then as further up I go, the clusters get smaller. And then I just start getting closer and closer to individual trees to represent that closed or that open canopy. So it's very dense. This Boreal or Taiga is dense at the bottom part, and then the further north that it goes, it starts to break up, and it creates this transition between a closed and an open canopy. So I think that works out rather well. And you can always throw in some bushes too. This is a taiga, so there's not as much species diversity. So you can put in a variety of coniferous trees in here. Like if you don't like that they're all the same, you could go back in and use a different tree. For instance, you can use this shaded pine. Maybe you want to put that in there, so put a couple shaded pine in there, or use this one as well. So it's up to you which one you think works best. Another thing that I sometimes like to do is show diversity in size. So I'll take some smaller variations of the tree and just kind of place them here and there sparsely. Maybe along here too, and that way I have a little bit more diversity in size, because nature is generally very diversified in its size and the scale, and so having a variety of sizes really helps with that. Okay, all right, well, out of 242 changes, we'll quickly save it. We'll let it go. To remember that Parchment World Style has clipping masks on the stamps, so you can always paint over them whatever the biome might be. So because it's a Boreal or Taiga, it's a little bit more closer to the snow. So you can just paint whatever texture underneath. It will also show up on the clipping masks on those stamps. So that's kind of helpful. All right, let's go do another Taiga, Boreal Taiga. This one's going to be a really big one. And I might follow the same kind of logic where I'll have closed to open, and then it transfers. It's such a huge forest, then it transitions over to a temperate rainforest. So that way we can kind of show a transition between two different forests being a nice giant forest biome. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my guide here. I just don't really kind of need it anymore. So I'll go up to the top, turn off my forest locations. Turn them off for now, or get it kind of further away. There we go. That's nice. Okay, so we'll start with the taiga part. And just for continuity, I'll go ahead and select a tree, so that way it's the same tree and the same size. But I'll do something a little different this time from this one. I don't want it to be exactly the same as this one. So I'm going to change it up just a little bit by doing a couple things. Like what I'll do is I'll create 3 really big clusters. And what I'll do is I'll just create the shape first, like this. Like here's some shapes. And then I'll go ahead and fill in that shape with the trees, like this. This way you kind of have an idea of the outline or the borders of where that forest is. So that's why I do that little circles first. When you have enough room, you can go in there and just kind of fill these in. And then just know that the closer you get to the center of these little forest clusters is where there's going to be the most dense. That's called your interior. So it's okay if the trees are loose and breaking up along the tree line. But in the center, make them nice and thick. And then, of course, you always just scatter a couple here and there to kind of break it up. That way you have a mix between closed and open canopy in this area. And then I'm also going to break up these edges because I don't want these clusters to look like perfect blobs. If I put a couple along the edge, it will break up that blobby feel to it. Like some of these look like a kidney bean. I don't want that to look like that. So just putting a couple along the tree line there will break that up so it looks a little more natural. And now that we've kind of done the taiga, we can kind of move our way inward towards a more temperate forest. So we'll go ahead and move over to this shaded pine just to show some transition. And we'll continue on these shaded pines down here into this forest just to kind of show a transition. I'll connect them into the ones down here, connect into this one. And then I can go ahead and kind of create those bean shapes, remember? Like this. And then the further down I go, I'll start creating a really, really dense forest like this. So let's create a dense part. One right here, one right here. There we go. And then I can go in and fill it. And there's a area option up here. It's called size area. If you look up here at the top, you'll see I can fill the area. Now there is a pitfall to this, but it's pretty easy to use, but you just kind of go over it like this. And then you'll be able to place many at once. Like this. So this is really the most easiest way to kind of create the forests, is just using that technique, and then go back to area 1 and then break up that tree line, because you don't want the blobby straight lines along that tree line. You want to break it up. So just kind of place along each edge here. There you go. Breaks it up a little bit. And because we're now in a different forest, we can also throw in some more diversity. So we can go in and throw in some other trees as well, like this deciduous one. And we'll just kind of throw them in here where I can kind of fit them along this edges in here. Put some up here a little bit. And then put a lot more further down that we go. Kind of go down here. This is a pretty big forest. But you got to have one giant forest in your world, right? Like this is where like maybe your elves would live, perhaps, or tieflings, or whatever it might be. Okay, there we go. Now we have these nice thick forests that you have here. There we go. We'll go ahead and quickly save it. Any stamp, so that option for the area only works with stamps, I believe, that are stamp sets. I'm not so sure that they work with like a single stamp, but I know for sure that they work with, they specifically work with, sorry, brain fart, work with a stamp set. So individually, I'm not so sure that would work. Okay, so one thing I do want to mention is that you can also control using object shadows to kind of paint stamps. So let's say that I want to show that instead of painting green all over this forest, so to show that it's green or whatever color I want it to be, I can use object shadows. So if you just select all the stamps that you want to change, and if you go over to object shadow, so shadows here, go to object shadow or custom object shadow, you see there's a black shadow there. But I can also go in and just like maybe like pick a green color that I want. Maybe like a dark kind of green color like this. And then what that does is it paints it that nice green. And I don't have to paint with multiple textures. So that's very helpful. So it's very, very nice to do that. You can do the same thing. Like maybe I want to select all these, go back to shadow, custom object shadow, and maybe I want to use a white type of shadow to kind of show that there's snow, that there's a little bit of mist or fog going on. So you can use object shadows to your advantage to do painting, especially with this parchment style, because it's just a lot easier than having to pick multiple textures and layer them all together. This is kind of a quick cheat that you can kind of do. Just know that I think that if you do this with like every stamp, let's say that you have like 1 billion trees or a large number of trees and you're using object shadows, it will likely gonna lag a little bit on your machine. Remember, we're an online tool. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're placing trees. I think we're going to go ahead and do the next one. I think you get the general idea on how that works. You can also do some cool tricks. For instance, I can select like this one tree right here and then go select all stamps like this. And then I can go in and then I can go back to shadow, go to custom object shadow, do it again, and then make that a darker kind of green. Let's see if I can find it. little bit of a darker green in there, or maybe a lighter green would be better. Let's take a look. I'm not sure. I might have accidentally selected every single one. Let's try this one. Select all stamps like this. There we go. It should select all of them just like that. And then we can go back to Custom Object Shadow. I'm not sure if I want to use a darker color or a lighter color. I'm not sure. Let's bring the blur down a little bit. There we go. That way I can get some variety here. Ah, there we go. Getting a little more variety. Go with a dark color. There we go. And by selecting one in a set and then selecting all just like that, you can edit every single tree that's just like that, not from the set, but that individual tree. And then you can edit that, and now you have a little bit more diversity in your trees. You notice how some of them are a darker green, some of them are a lighter green. That's all very, very helpful. And some of them are kind of this brownish color. Now you have this diversity. And remember, temperate rainforests or temperate forests have the most diversity. So we have light green, dark green, brown trees. All of that is very, very helpful. Okay, I'm just going to save one more time, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next forest. I do believe we're just going to go across and just go right through the temperate zone. Hey, first time chatter, the Snake Man. Glad that you're here, by the way. Thanks for watching our streams. I hope you've got an awesome weekend planned. Nothing but rain where I'm at for the weekend. All right, let's go ahead and pull up the guide here with all the different forests that I had. We'll go back up. Where did that? There it is right there. Kind of hard to see that bar right there. Might see what I can do to change that. Let's go forest locations. Bring that opacity back up. There you go. So you can see we added quite a bit there. Let's go with our next one, which is our Coniferous Forest. Remember, it's going to be mostly conifers. But what I want to do, it is in my temperate zone, as you've noticed. And you'll notice that there is a mountain range that separates the forest from that desert right there. And we talked in that previous episode, there's a rain shadow here on this desert, as well as it's kind of an interior desert as it's furthest away from water. But this mountain range right here produces enough like rainfall to have this coniferous forest right here. But at the same time, it's next to that desert, so it's arid enough to where maybe specifically coniferous trees can survive there better, much like the taiga. So there's just more conifers than there is deciduous here. And we're just going to follow that same kind of method. I'm going to take this right here. And I'm not going to paint. I'm not going to use object shadows this time. I'll paint for this one. But I'll go ahead and select a tree from here that I want to use, because these are mostly coniferous. And then what I'll do is I'll do something a little bit different. Like maybe I want to add like a fantasy element to it. Like make it a little bit different. So let's create some like striations in these forests. So like I'll go through like this and create this like striation that kind of goes across. And then I'll create like another striation that goes across like this. Break up that line. And this way we can get kind of a different design this time. Oops, I'll make sure that's behind that mountain. There we go. Like this. Add another one over here. Add another striation right there. That looks good. Okay, that looks good. And then I'll bring the size down and then add in some variety of the smaller ones. And then because this is a temperate forest in a temperate zone, we can add in a couple extra stuff. I think there might be, a bush. Oh, there's no bushes right now. That's okay. What you can do is you can use trees. So let's say I want to take this tree right here and I want to use this as like a bush. I can just select it. Make sure that I got at 100% here. I'm going to go to advanced settings. I'm going to go to transform and I'm going to change the height. There we go. And I can kind of place that little tiny little tree right like this. And we're going to create some bushes like this. That will give it a little bit more diversity. There we go. That's good. And then I'm going to try we're going to do a different method. We're going to paint instead of using object shadows like we did last time. Don't forget that kind of neat trick of kind of placing clusters. Let's make it even smaller, and then we can add in some smaller kind of bushes in here. that open space along the canopy. There we go, looks good. And then I'll just go ahead and use paint instead, so I can pick kind of a texture that I want to use. I can use like this parchment green. Let's go with this green right here. And what I'll do is I'll paint the whole thing green first. So the whole thing should be green, like this. And then I'll go in and use a lighter brown texture and then put that in the open spaces. So when I say open spaces, I mean where there are no clusters of trees. So I can go in like this, and wherever there are no trees, just going to go in and kind of just paint in those negative spaces, because I want that green to be on the trees. And then I have a nice coniferous forest. Not too complex. Let's go ahead and turn turn this off. I wish there was a button that would take you to the very, very top. I'm going to have to look into maybe requesting that. Let's go ahead and turn the opacity on this so you can kind of see what it looks like. So you have this kind of striation of a coniferous forest, just to kind of make it different from these other ones that are like really dense, these closed and open canopy ones. So I really wanted to do something different. I really want a variety of forest types. I don't want to make the same kind. So I'll quickly save this and we'll move on to the next one. Yeah, be creative and make fantasy stuff too. Like maybe you wanted to make a swirl of trees to make a fantasy forest, or maybe you wanted to have some floating islands and then put the forest on the floating islands. Be creative, right? You don't just want fantasy or just natural biomes. You want to add in fantasy because they really contrast well against natural biomes. So when you have all these natural biomes around, there's no fantasy biome to contrast against it, right? Because it's really going to pop out. So be sure to don't skimp on your fantasy elements. Don't just focus on the too realistic, because then it kind of loses its fun, right? It's a fantasy map. Add in those fantasy biomes, okay? All right, so you can see what it looks like here. My painting, we can probably do more painting later. I usually do a second coat or a third or fourth coat a little bit later, depending. Just make sure that you have a brown, like a dirt texture underneath, so that way you can texture on top of it. Remember the secret to texturing, it's about layering, right? It's about multiple strokes. A good painter does multiple strokes to make a painting. They don't make an object or a figure or whatever with just one stroke. So that's the secret to texturing. Be patient, take your time, drop the opacity, have the soft brush on, and slowly kind of go over it with multiple kind of textures, okay? It's much more helpful. Let's go over to our forest locations. Let's check time here. 3:30. Oh, cool. Tons of time still. Let's bring the opacity back up, and we'll choose that next location. Let's go to this Evergreen Rainforest right here. Let's go choose this one. And I'm going to do something a bit different this time. Let's go ahead and you notice that we have kind of a limited amount of trees to kind of work with. And that's okay. We can change them and edit them as we see fit to make them different. So let's take this tree right here. I'll go over to transform and I'll change the height. So that way I can get a much taller type of tree, bring the height up. So you see I have this taller type of tree. I want to show these kind of evergreens. So now I have this taller one. And what I'll do is I'll create a cluster of these taller trees, a cluster. So the interior of this forest has the thicker, taller trees. Yeah, let's put a bigger one right here at the bottom. So that way I don't have all the same. You notice that these clusters are all relatively the same size. You want to vary the clusters. Medium size, big, small, maybe just a couple, like 3 or 4, and then some randos here and there. And then take that same tree, bring the height back down, and then on the outskirts of the forest, put in these shorter ones. So the taller ones are in the center, while the shorter ones are on the outskirts. That way you kind of have a little bit something different than, because there's only 2 different coniferous trees, right? And so how is it that we can take one coniferous tree and make it into 7? By changing the transform, by changing the color options, by using object shadows to change the color. because this style hasn't really been updated recently. And so until then, you have to find yourself being a little creative. And that's what the transform tool is for, right? And make sure that we get lots of requests on Arcani for more stamps for this style, because honestly, this is an underappreciated style. I really like Parchment, and it deserves a heck of a lot more love. Just me. Okay, let's go ahead and just like before, we kind of put in some of these kind of bushes. Let's make sure to put a couple in here as well. Just kind of here and there. Let's put some along here. There we go. And then with this one, I think I'll also do, I think we'll use object shadows this time. Let's do that. Let's go with, let's see here, shadow, custom object shadow. Let's use maybe like a brownish color this time. Or actually, you know, let's go with kind of a faded green. Let's bring the blur down a little bit. Let's bring the intensity up. Let's bring the brightness down a little bit. There we go. Okay, that looks fine. That looks good. Okay. And then just like before, what I'll think I'll do is this time I'll put a dark brown underneath. And the reason why is because when trees and pine, any type of tree, they drop a lot of stuff on the ground. For instance, like that stuff's called duff. So dead pine leaves, dead leaves, all of that accumulates and then turns into duff, and it biodegrades. That stuff generally gets like really brown. To kind of show that, I'll just take this brownish color. Let's bring the opacity down because it's so dark. Whenever I'm doing a dark texture on a light texture, I bring the opacity down so that way it's not so intense. And then I'll just bring that dark green texture, dark brown texture, and just put it right underneath. And you'll notice that brown and green go really well together. They're natural colors. So just right where you see the forest underneath of it, this is going to represent all those dead leaves and pine needles. There we go. Nice. Okay. So now we have a nice coniferous forest there. That looks good. 203 changes. We should definitely save it. So you're learning how to make do with the limited amount of stamps that we kind of have here. So helpful. Let's go ahead and quickly end the save this, and we'll move on to the next one. We still got lots and lots of time still. I just want to make sure we have enough time to cover some fantasy ones as well. Okay, let's go ahead and take a step back and look at it. So the forests are kind of coming together. You see we have some really, really big forests. Like this one right here is just massive. And you have this one over here, Taiga, Boreal. And we have different types of forests here. Great, great, cool. This coniferous one looks good. Awesome. Let's keep going. We'll go back up to the top. Wish I had a up to the top button. That would be very helpful. Let's go back into our forest locations again. That way I can kind of see it. I see that there's a deciduous forest right here. You know what? Let's go over some techniques, not using a bunch of stamps. So I'll show you a cool trick on how to, different techniques on making forests. What I should do with this one is this coniferous one is I'm going to make sure that I have the right size. And then I'm just going to create the outline of the forest. So I'll bring the scale up a little bit so you can see it. And then I'm going to create this line like this. Okay, there we go. Create this line. I'm going to create some stuff on the edges too here as well. There we go. This looks good. Okay. Now that I've done that part, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my forest guide as well. We'll go ahead and turn this off. Oh, oopsie. For some reason. My computer freeze? I'm not sure what's going on here. There we go. Got it. Okay. All right. So you see that I have these various trees right here. And I'm going to do this cool trick where I'm going to use a clipping mask to hide the backside of the tree. So if I go in like this and I pick add mode, I'm going to turn the merge shape off, fill clipping masks, and I'm going to bring the blur up quite a bit. I'm going to use the brush, bring the scale down. I'm just going to quickly do a little test. I'm going to go across like this. Oop, looks like I need to go up a layer. Let's keep going up a layer. There we go. Let's bring the blur back down. Let's see here. Let's bring the blur down even more. There we go. Is my opacity. There's the problem. Okay. Now I'm going to take that blurred shape, and I'm going to try to copy and paste that piece. Let's go ahead and take this piece right here. Copy, paste. I'm going to place it. Oh, let's go up a layer. I'm going to place it just right behind this, like this. Copy, paste, copy, paste. Keep putting them in here like this. There we go. And then you kind of have a little forest right here, and then you can fill it in with whatever texture that you want to do to represent like a forest. I'm not sure which one is the best one for that. Grass might work, dirt, cracked ground, swamp, waves, stains. I'm not sure. Let's try grass, just see what it looks like. I'm not sure. Bring the opacity up. Nah, that doesn't really look really good. So the other option you can do is just take individual trees and kind of place them in the middle. I don't think there's any proper texture that we can use, but you take a couple in the middle, just make sure they're above the clipping mask layer. Put a couple in here, one there, here, here, and then you just take that clipping mask again and then just put them underneath like this on top. Go up a layer, keep going. Oops, is it not going up? There we go. And then just place that at the base so you can only see the tips there. Ooh, I don't only want to show the tips of the tree here. You don't want to show in the interior. You don't want to see the base of the trees, right? Because it's the interior, right? And you just kind of want to hide the shadows and hide some of these parts of the trees. And then you have some trees inside of there like that. So you kind of have an easy way to make a forest there. I'm going to go ahead and use some of these shorter ones and then kind of break up the edges a little bit. There we go. Oopsie, I think I put on the wrong scale there. There we go. There we go. Okay. So a lot of different ways that you can kind of make a forest. So there's that way. I don't know if I personally enjoy the oblong shape that I made here, but you get the general idea on how to put it together. You create the ring itself. You hide the back part of the forest with a clipping mask. You put a couple in the center, and then you hide the base of them. And then you could use some kind of texture in here. I'm not sure which one to use. That grass could work. I mean, it's not really the best choice, but you could throw in grass if you wanted to show like the canopy, like this if you wanted to. A lot of different options there. It's up to you on which one you really want to do. Okay, where am I at? 151 changes. We'll quickly save and go to the next one. But I think most of the methods that I've come up with for making forests have been for fantasy world. There's just a smaller variety to kind of work with. I'm definitely going to be making more requests for more Parchment stuff. But I hope you got the general idea at least on how to make a forest that way. I generally use this method right here when I have like a massive amounts of forest land on my map, and that way I can avoid placing tens of thousands of trees. So I try not to use this method unless I'm just plagued with a lot of different forests to kind of work with. Otherwise, I don't think this method kind of works as well, but you get the general idea. Let's go back up. Go back to forest locations, bring the opacity up, and we'll kind of move on to our next one. Where are we at for time here? Ooh, 38. Okay, which ones have I not done yet? We haven't done mangrove, and we haven't done a tropical dry and a tropical moist. So we want to make sure that we cover those. So let's go into mangrove so that we got something a little different. I don't want to keep making deciduous and coniferous and different types of forests. You're kind of getting the general idea on those. So we'll go with that mangrove. This mangrove's going to go right here. What I'll do is I'll just create a regular tropical type of forest. So if I type in tree, I'll put in these tropical palm trees, and I'll kind of put them in here. And then the closer that I get to the water, I'll start changing the trees so to show that there's like a transition between trees that are not adapted to brackish water. And then once you get onto the water, we'll use a different tree to show that is the tree that has adapted to that. Now I'm going to remember to try to keep the scale here. So I'll bring this palm tree right next to this tree right here. Make sure I got the scale right. And then I'll go in and create a plethora of palm trees just right in here like this. We can maybe even put like an oasis in there or something. I'm not sure. Make a little hole so we can put stuff in there. And then we'll have this forest kind of go all along the coast here. Create like, remember that trick of doing clusters? A bunch of clusters there, puts a bunch here. And then once we start getting to the land part or the water part, we'll use a different tree. Let's use these willow trees. I think this should be distinct enough. And then what I'll do is I'll just place a couple along the coastline. It's a little big, make it a little bit smaller. But just place a couple along the coastline, just right along the coastline like this. Maybe some a little further out into the water. Obviously, that would be like a mile or two out, but for the purpose of the video, so you can, or the purpose of actually seeing the map, we place them a little further out. I'll make a little bit smaller ones, and then just kind of along the coastline, make sure to put a couple here and there so you have that nice mangrove. And then we can go in and we can kind of select every single one of them, and we can either use object shadows or we can paint them. That's really up to you. This is a temperate zone, so let's go with, you know what, I think I'll paint it this time. So I'll use this kind of green color right here. Make sure the opacity is all up set to FG, and I'll just put this nice kind of like green color right here. You know, I don't think I like that one. Let's go with this color instead, just see what it looks like. Yeah, that works fine. And then I'll actually select all the different trees. We'll use an object shadow plus texturing. We'll do a little bit of both. Custom object shadow. I don't want to keep using like the same green like every time. Bring that intensity up. There we go. Bring the blur down. That way we can get that extra shadows in there. And then we'll go ahead and create a lighter color and then kind of place that into the center part. Whenever you're kind of doing the texturing, remember to kind of bring the opacity down. And then right here in the center, I'll put this lighter color. And you would expect this negative space to be a little bit lighter because it has more ability to see, or it's open. It's not closed, so more sunlight can get to it. So when you have these openings between the forest areas, don't forget to paint in those open areas a little bit lighter. They have more access to the sun because there's not a thick forest there. And so it's also going to help to make the trees pop out because the trees are a darker color and then the open spaces are a lighter color. So very helpful to kind of remember that trick. So now we have that nice mangrove plus this other type of tropical or whatever kind of forest this is right here. We'll quickly save it and go to the next one. We're moving right along. Lots of different forests. Let's go ahead and make a couple fantasy ones. Let's make a couple fantasy ones. I want to make sure that we fit those in here. And with fantasy, there really isn't any rules. You can kind of mix match natural and fantastical elements. For instance, I have a mushroom forest that I want to create, right? And so a mushroom forest, you know, you're not going to have giant mushrooms, at least ones with the giant caps. If I remember reading correctly, mushrooms underground are quite large. They can get massive. Here in Oregon, I think we have one of the largest mushroom structures in the world, somewhere in our eastern area. So kind of cool. Mushrooms can get really, really big that way underground, not so much. I'm going to change where this mushroom forest is. I put it right here, but I think I'm going to put it where the river is, just so that I can add a slight sliver of realism. Mushrooms like it dark and damp. I'm not going to be able to create as much dark as I want without making it underground, but at least it's in a valley snuggled in between these mountains. And these mountains are giving at least some shade, so it wouldn't hurt to add a mushroom forest there. There's also that river system right there. Mushrooms like it damp, and so it close to water would be helpful. So we got two of the criteria, some shade from the shadows of the mountains and some water sources as well. Kind of makes sense. So I'm adding a little bit of fantasy with natural, right? Where I'm putting it is the natural part. The unnatural part will probably be the size of the mushrooms and stuff. Now, I'm not so sure that we even have mushrooms, but that's okay because you don't have to. You don't have to. Let's go with this one right here. You don't have to use those. You can find your own or make your own, just like we did with the bushes. We did some transforming. I just changed the height like this, and what we'll end up doing is we'll also change the color to different colors, so that way it doesn't look like a green tree. It'll look like something else. So I'll go ahead and take this mushroom right here, and what I might want to do is go ahead and just place a bunch of these in here. Remember the clusters? So they do look like mushrooms a little bit, so that's kind of good. I'm placing them kind of close to the water as well as close to the mountains where it's damp. Remember that trick we talked about? Place clusters, big, medium, size, small. Yep, a red shadow, purple shadows, different shadows. We'll probably go with different colors because I think that would be cool. Let's also grow some smaller mushrooms in here. I'm not going to worry about making it super dense. I want to leave a little bit of open space. You could put like some floating islands over top of the mushroom forest, so that way it continues more shade. That's one trick that you could do, by the way. Let's go now with the small size after we just did the medium size. We'll kind of place these all around, so different colors or different sizes. Have this nice mushroom forest going on here. Here, 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 and here. There we go. And then what I'll do is I'll select a couple. So I'll select one, select all stamps like this. Oopsie, you know what? I just realized something. I should lock all these other ones first so I don't accidentally select them all. So I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to lock them so I don't accidentally select them. Because I just noticed when I say select them all, it's selecting all of the forests that I've done before, and that's not good, right? I don't want to accidentally select all of them. I just want to select the ones within here. So by locking all the other ones, I can only select specific ones now. So I select one, go to select all like this. Oopsie, looks like there's some that I missed around here somewhere. Did I miss some? Let's take a look here. I must have missed something. Did I miss? What did I miss? Ah, there we go, right there. Let's go ahead and lock those. There we go. Cool. I want to make sure that I don't accidentally select them. Let's go select all like this. Oopsie, for some reason, keep selecting that, and I don't fully understand why that is. Bizarre. Okay, well, that's fine. We're just going to do it rando anyway. So we'll just kind of select a couple randos. Thank goodness there's not too many of them. Otherwise, that would have been kind of arduous. Maybe I need to refresh the page. I'm not sure. We'll go over to Object Shadow. And we're going to choose a variety of colors. Like maybe one will be purple. And we'll bring that shadow down and then bring that intensity up so we can get that purple color. That looks good. And then we'll kind of select a couple more. And then we can choose like red or blues or greens, right? So we'll go in here, Object Shadow. And let's choose maybe, someone said red, so let's maybe go with a red color. Bring the intensity up, bring the blur down. There we go. That way I can kind of get it in there. And then let's go ahead and select a couple more. We'll put blues, we'll put greens, we'll put pinks. We'll put various kind of colors in here. There we go. Go back to Custom Object Shadow. Let's go with the green here. Bring the blur down. Bring that intensity up. There we go. Now I got that nice green color. Actually, let's go with blue instead. I kind of like that a little bit better. There we go. Get that nice blue color going. Bring the intensity up just a little bit more. There you go. And so now you kind of have this mushroom kind of fade-like space. I might want to consider like maybe put some texture underneath of it, like maybe a mix of like blue and red textures or purple textures. So I can go in here with that purple texture that I picked and just kind of place it in here. And now I have like this kind of weird like mushroom type of a biome. Very much fantasy, right? And then I'll select them all, lock, save, and then we'll go do our next fantasy forest. I think you guys are kind of getting the general idea on how to make forests with the large to small clusters, with individual trees scattered about, using object shadows, painting That's what's so nice about the Parchment World style, is that you have a lot of options, unlike Fantasy World where you're stuck with the colors without changing the hue. But with Parchment World, you just have so many options. You can paint things individually, you can use an object shadow to paint it, you can use textures to paint. There's all these different things that you can do, and that's very, I find that very, very helpful. One of the reasons why I love the Parchment style is that you can be a little more artistic with it because of that, and I like that quite a bit. Let's go ahead and create a dead forest, because this is one I haven't created yet. And this one's not too complex. I'm probably going to use some dead trees to make this, as you would kind of expect. Oopsie, I'm trying to get that. There we go, forest location. We'll go ahead and turn that off. I don't need it. This whole area right here is going to require dead trees. So let's go ahead and type in tree. There we go. And you have some dead trees right here. So I'll kind of zoom in. I'll make sure that I have the right scale. Always making sure that I got the right scale. Super important that I do that. Let's take a look at how big this tree is. That's fairly big. Let's go about that size right there. I think it's okay to have some fantasy, like maybe this dead forest has like massive like mountain size or mountain height trees. So it's a good fantasy element. And what I'll do is I'll maybe create like some clusters that kind of go, oopsie, I don't have it select to multiple. So right now this right here, this is kind of set to placement single. So if you don't know about this, let's say that you have a stamp set that's not set to random. You can totally change, or not set to single placement, multiple, or auto. Notice how it's set to single. I go down and select multiple, and now I can select multiple. When I select single, notice that when I click, it doesn't let me drag. It just selects it immediately and selects a single one. So make sure that if you do have a set that's not it's not selecting multiple, just go down here to advanced settings, scroll down, and then click multiple, and now you can select multiple. So just kind of remember that, okay? And then I just go in like this, single click, and just create a series of clusters again. I'm going to create a larger kind of cluster right here. Remember to break up the line work. Put some here, and we'll put some over here. And then when the closer we get to the ocean, I'll just have little clusters kind of going about here. Don't forget that scale thing. Bring a couple down in size, and then place a couple smaller ones. And if I want to make it fantasy, I can add some like fantastical elements to it, make it more interesting. Like maybe these trees are an orange color or something. I'm not sure. Let's go over to shadow, custom object shadow. Let's go with an orangish color. I'll kind of make it kind of a bright orange. Bring that blur down a little bit. I'm not sure I like the orange. Maybe a darker color would work better. Let's go with that one. Yeah, I think that darker color looks fine. And then we'll pick a texture for underneath of it. Let's go with this brown one right here. Just kind of see what it looks like. Go back to 100%. Just kind of go over it to see what it looks like. I don't think so. Oopsie. Also, my softness is up. Okay. Let's kind of... let's pick an alpha texture. Like this one right here is called Cracked Ground. Let's put that here. So I'll add some cracked ground to this dead forest to kind of show that the soil is kind of broken, and it'll add some nice artifacts in there. And then I'll add those artifacts into this forest as well, or that wasteland. So now I have that nice cracked texture underneath where the dead forest. 53. Okay. I think we're going to do one more, and then we're going to call it good. I think we should make another fantasy one. Honestly, I got to check out all the various trees that we have, and then maybe we can make like a fantasy one, maybe like a Fae forest. If people have suggestions, let me know. We can do that too. I'll go into the catalog here and see what we have. Oh, you know what? What about like a world tree or something like that, right? It's not necessarily a forest. Salt forest earlier, I think. Yes, like a salt forest would be something like a petrified forest. So maybe the trees would be like dead and white. Like maybe like I did here, I can use these same trees, but I'll change maybe the texturing. So maybe we'll put like a salt forest right next to the ocean, right? The ocean is full of salt water. Maybe this was a salt pan, that had a form. Maybe this is a salt pan where the remaining trees petrified, and so they're kind of this white snag-like color, but they're petrified, like made of stone. And then we'll use like the same kind of cracked ground texture in this one as well, but we'll use different colors for that. So I'll come in here and I'm just going to place a couple. We're going to make this, remember the Boreal Forest, there's a closed and an open. We'll make this that concept. It's a open canopy type of forest. There's only a couple trees. And then what I might do is have a couple of them leaning over, like they fell over. I think that would be kind of interesting, right? Have a couple like leaning off into here. Have a couple maybe going this way. Maybe one leaning over this way. Maybe they're kind of on top of each other like this. And then put like one more over here. And then I'll select all of those. And I have some options here. I can maybe use a white. Or I can play with the hue, the saturation, with the color stuff. I could bring the contrast all the way down. And then kind of bring the brightness up if I wanted to create like a white kind of dead trees, like a white snag. And then maybe I want to use some kind of, maybe I can use this snow texture right here to kind of represent like snow, to represent kind of like salt. But I'll bring the texture down a little bit so it's a little bit smaller. That way it's distinguished from, different from the snow texture. Oh, pillars of salt that grew like trees or something. Oh, I like that idea. That's cool. I'm going to go with this one. But I think you get the general idea of it. Pillars. Okay, let's try that real quick. Let me go with these. Bring the roundness all the way up. And if you're saying pillars, what we could do is change the height on these. So we can bring the height like way up like this to create like these pillars. And now they have like this ghostly kind of appearance to it. Let's change the brightness so where it's like pure white. There we go. There we go. Now you have like this tall, spiky, towering type of feel here. I'm also going to add that cracked ground. But this time I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring the brightness up and the contrast all the way down. So I have like this kind of bright, cracked ground texture. So when I place it down like this, you'll see that there's some cracked ground there as well. Right. Well, with this one, the cracked ground, the white textures that I'm using underneath does hide a little bit underneath of it. So I think that works out well there. So I think overall that looks good. You have these kind of spiring, petrified forests. Hey, first time chatter, by the way. Awesome. Yeah, it does look a little awkward because there's a little shadow baked in at the bottom. But, you know, if you have them small enough, you can barely see them. Like down here, you can barely see the shadow. But I think you guys kind of get the general idea here. There was a couple more forests that I want to add in. I'll probably off-screen delete this one because I just don't care for this style of forest here. So I'll probably end up getting rid of that a little bit later. But I think you guys get the general idea on the placement, what kind of forest there is, and all this kind of stuff. But there's a lot of different forests. Definitely play with fantasy. There's a lot of different fantasy forests. Like we could have made a blood forest where the trees like ooze blood and there's like bloody rivers that flow away from that forest and then towards the ocean. You could have like an obsidian forest where you have like trees that are made of obsidian. So we could have made the trees like a dark black color. You could have had a forest that is floating in the sky. Like maybe you have a couple forests that are just floating above and then you would just create a shadow underneath those trees. You could have a whole host of different things that you can kind of play with. You could have a world tree in a forest. There's all these different things that you can kind of do. So lots of cool stuff. Be creative. Don't just do your pure natural forest. It's nice to throw in those fantasy elements. Like you notice that this kind of forest pops out so much because it's just so different, right? You've got these kind of crystalline like towers of trees here. This mushroom forest, it's so different. It sticks out, right? When you look here, which biome sticks out the most? To me, it's this one, right? Because it's just got those brighter colors. It doesn't look quite as natural, has a Candyland feel to it. This is what I mean by fantasy biomes contrasting so much. So definitely go with that route. Show more fantasy elements, so that way it contrasts and pops out. All right. Well, I think that's it, everybody. Thank you so much for part 4. Next week, our masterclass is how to make shops. And then I think we're going to be doing part 5 on Friday of next week. And then I'll be out some of July. I'm going to be traveling to the East Coast to visit family. So look for a reduced schedule next month. So I will be out. All right, you guys have been awesome. I love doing streams with you guys. You guys are awesome. Don't be afraid to give more suggestions in the future for the types of biomes, because I don't want to drone on forever and just kind of show you what I've got. I want to hear your ideas too, because I think that makes it more fun. All right, please stay safe and healthy. Merry map making, and enjoy your weekend, okay? Ta-ta for now, everyone. Bye.